Hello and welcome to the Car Care Nut channel. In today's video I'm going to share with you some mechanic tips on engine noise diagnosis. Some simple stuff that DIY mechanics can do to verify the concern of noise from the engine. But before we get started, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos. If you are a returning subscriber, well, thank you so much for watching another one of my videos. Without further ado, let's get right into it. So the car that we're working on today is a 2005 4Runner. The owner concern is a noise from the front of the engine. We're going to look at this noise. We're going to actually fix it in this video so you can see beginning to end. Here's how that noise sounds like. Now before we begin diagnosis, let's pull this engine cover because it hangs over so we can access the drive belt and the accessory area so we can start listening around. So the first tip of diagnosis, listen to the noise general area, just using your ears. Do we have the noise from the front? Do we have it from left, from right? That's your first thing. Once you've isolated a general area of the noise, which in the case of this 4Runner, the noise is coming from the front of the engine, so I suspect something with the drive belt or the accessories in the front, not something with the valve train. And another thing that you could, if this is an older car and you're dealing with a serious engine noise, is the noise up top or is it the bottom end? And the trick I'm going to share with you in this video will work for all this. You need a very simple tool. A very long screwdriver. That's all you need. Now, in most cases, there are two methods you can do this. You can get a fancy stethoscope and go spend all this money, but a screwdriver like this, or even a pry bar would work as well. Anything that is long so you can easily reach in with it. You're just gonna reach into the area that you suspect. Most of the time, if it's like an idler pulley, which by the way, this is what's the noise in this one, that we've already diagnosed this, but if it's an idler pulley, you're going to put it at the bolt of the idler pulley while the car is running. You can actually just put your hand here and you'll feel the vibration, and then you're going to compare it to another thing, another item until you find the loudest one. If the noise is not as loud, you're actually going to put your ear on it. You're going to feel that vibration. And that's how you're going to very easily, with a very simple tool, kind of zoom in and dial in your noise source. If it's something on the valve train, you're going to put your screwdriver right here. You're going to feel it. If it's not something you're feeling, you're going to listen to it. You're going to listen to it. That is the best way to diagnose noise. However, this is very important, and this is where DIY mechanics get themselves in a problem. You can't just count on this method. Even if you're using a fancy stethoscope, you can't just say, okay, well, this alternator is making noise, I'm just going to go ahead and replace it. Never do that. You always have to remove that component and check it. But before you do, the very easy thing to do is remove the drive belt. Folks, we're working with Toyotas here. Most of them don't really have engine noise that is valve train or whatnot. Most of the time, it is accessories that's making noise. Remove the drive belt is the first step. Does your noise go away? That is your biggest telltale sign that you have something in the accessories. And then you're going to start spinning things by hand until you find it, the similar noise that you heard here, just to get a general feel of where you're headed towards. You gotta verify before you just go and replace parts. One note, the alternator on Toyotas is always a giant source of vibration and noise. They always make noise when you use this method. So you can just disconnect the connector on the alternator, not the big wire with the 10mm, no, the little connector. Disconnected, that actually shuts off the alternator and it'll make noise diagnosis a lot easier. So in this case of this truck, you already heard how it sounds with the belt. Let me go ahead and remove the belt and we'll listen to it without the belt. Okay, so here's the belt. Let's talk a little bit about the belts. Every time you take a belt, you're gonna flip it and do this. I hope you can see this really well. This belt has no cracks, no dry rot. The edges are not completely frayed. I'm gonna call this one good. But if you're watching this and you're DIY, or if you're not DIY, you're just watching this for the information, let's talk about the back side. See how this one has like a shiny look to it? And maybe have a few grooves on it? That is normal. Don't go to a dealership and they'll tell you, oh yeah, your belt is glazed, needs to replace. Well, guess what, buddy? It ain't a donut. It's not glazed, that's normal, because the belt is driven on its backside as well. So if the pulley has a little bit of rust, it's gonna create these tiny little grooves, or it'll have that shiny look. That's normal. I consulted with the owner of this truck. This belt is not that old, so we're not gonna replace it. It's their car, their money, they can decide this stuff. Usually I recommend you replace a belt. If this is an original belt, you're taking it out for a diagnosis or for repairs. In this case, we're doing repairs here. But in the case of this 4Runner, we're not going to replace it because this belt is actually 1 year old. Let's go ahead and start this engine, see how it sounds without the belt, and you see how quiet it is. A lot more quiet there. So now that we know our issue is actually something belt related, let's go and spin those pulleys with the engine off to see which one it is. We're going to reach in and spin everything. Spinning the alternator is pretty quiet. Spinning the second idler next to the alternator, it's a little noisy, but not crazy. Spinning the compressor looks fine. Power steering pump, that looks fine. The big fan, which has the water pump behind it. One thing when you do one of these, always grab the pulley. This one has a slight play. Water pumps typically should not have play. This one has a very slight play, but it's nothing crazy. I'm gonna let the owner know that this water pump, we're gonna keep an eye on it. Eventually it'll start making noise, and the problem with these water pumps, when they start wiggling like that, they could start wearing the edges of the belt, and eventually they go. So that's something, we're gonna put this one as yellow, but let's continue with the other idlers. Oh yes, here we go. And I don't know if you can hear this well on the video, but we'll take this idler out and you'll see it. I mean, this guy is singing right here. There's one last idler at the bottom. I can reach it from the top. Oh yes, this one is singing the blues as well. So, we got two idlers that are very noisy. We're gonna go ahead and actually replace the three. I explained to the customer, if you're gonna replace two idlers, leave the third. The third is the same age and it's almost there. If we're gonna do this, let's replace three idlers and be done with it. So let me go ahead and pull the idlers out, and then I'll spin it in front of you so you can see how loud they are. And then we'll go ahead and reassemble this truck and verify that our repair is 100% complete. Here's the first idler. Let's listen to this guy singing. Oh yes, this one is bad, bad, bad. So let's remove the other two and we'll compare them as well so you can hear. This one is a really bad one. But the one that I told you is not as bad. I want you to hear that as well. Then we'll go ahead and talk about, these are actually updated pulleys and you'll see how they're a little bit different than new ones that we're gonna install. So let me go ahead and remove the other two and we'll continue. Here's the other one. Now this one was not as loud. It does have a little bit of noise, but not crazy. Let's remove the third one, and the third one is the one that I have to get from the bottom. So I'm going to lean underneath the truck and get it. Here is the last one, this one. Listen how loud that guy is. So, let's look at the new parts and we'll compare them to the new ones, because this is where you gotta be careful when you replace some of these updated parts. Okay, every time you take parts out of your car for replacement, You don't just take it, throw it in the garbage, and replace it. You always gotta look. For example, these idlers, they're different. Just by see them stand here, you can see the two of them are the same, one of them is different. Let's take a closer look. This one, do you see how it looks? This part that is sunk in, this one is almost flush. This one also has this sunk in part. You always gotta make sure that you put these in the right spot, especially when it comes to a belt situation. These idlers, you put them in the wrong spot, the belt's not gonna line up right. Now here are all the new parts. You notice two of pulleys are the same, one is different. You already can guess which one is which. We're gonna take a look. You always compare your new part to your old one. See how this one has the same flat surface? So we're gonna put that with this. Now let's take these two apart. Here's that one. Looks identical to this one. And then, of course, this is the same part number, so it'll be the same. Here we go. Let me clear this mess up, and we're going to talk about what got updated with these pulleys. So, if you look at the back of this, let me take this bolt out. Look at the back of this bearing. Now, let's look at the new one. See the difference there? They actually changed the design in the bearing itself. But you notice that this one now is exposed and this one was sealed off. So what you have to do in this case, for this 4Runner, is get another plate which goes at the back to seal it up. Just to give it a little bit more space, because this one has this piece of this metal around that seals the bearing in the back, this one does not. So this is how you know the updated parts, because otherwise they look very similar, and if you don't install this, you're just going to leave that bearing exposed and all the dirt and grime is going to get inside of it, and now we're back to square one. Having said that, let's go ahead and install these back on the truck, install our belt, and start it up and see how it sounds. Did we fix anything here? Okay, I'm going to install the bottom one first. Go underneath the truck. Folks, this kind of job is extremely DIY. There's nothing really to it. And I'm talking to you from underneath the truck. That is an interesting, you're just looking at a picture that is not moving and some guy talking, maybe the car is talking to you. But this kind of job is very, very DIY. Simple diagnosis, simple repair, and very, very satisfying. You do a job like this at home, you're gonna save yourself a good chunk of change. One thing I'll tell you about these idlers before I forget. Every time you install an idler, when you're done tightening it, spin it. Make sure nothing is binding, because if you install this with the wrong washers, it could actually lock up and it'll just throw your belt out immediately. So always spin them by hand. Let's install the last two. We'll throw the belt on and start it up, see how she sounds. This truck belongs to a viewer, and he's actually standing behind the camera. He told me this truck almost have 200,000 miles. He wants to go 300,000 miles. There's some rust on the frame. Comment down below if you think he should replace it with the 5th generation or he should keep going until 300,000. That's tight and spinning freely. Install the last one. Sometimes you have to do the mechanic yoga. Flip upside down to twist your arm in a way so you can get in tight spaces. Let's find a way that works. Spin this guy. Yeah, that's spin. And you might have noticed when I was checking the pulleys, I forgot to mention the tensioner. There's a tensioner pulley right here. I'm also spinning it right now and it's very smooth. This tensioner can be a pain to replace. Here's a little tip for you. If you ever have, and this also applies to the 2GR FE as well, in like V6 Camry, V6 Avalon, Highlander, Sienna, and whatnot. If you have a bad pulley on the tensioner, not exactly a bad tensioner, and if you go look up the labor time or look up the procedure, the tensioner sits behind the AC compressor, which is a nightmare to pull out for DIY. It just becomes a lot more complicated. If all you have that is bad is a pulley that is making noise, but the tensioner otherwise is good, the bolt on the pulley is a reverse thread. You can actually loosen it by normally tightening, if that makes sense. And you can actually only replace the pulley. You'll have to buy the whole tensioner, but if that's the only concern you have, that's a little trick. Not something I recommend as a professional to do, because you know, if the customer is paying you to replace the tensioner, you gotta replace the tensioner. This is mainly for DIY, to save yourself the headache of pulling the compressor and all this mess. Thought I'd throw this one in because it is reverse thread. That's the only thing you gotta know about it, so you wouldn't snap the bolt trying to loosen it when you're actually tightening it. Having said that, I think we're all done here. Let's throw the belt on real quick. And as a mechanic joke, and something I don't know if you've noticed this before, this is a snap-on ratchet, and Snap-on has invented this thing. Notice it says on and off. So before you go home at night, make sure you turn off your wrenches, otherwise your battery runs out. Had to say that, it's a good joke. But the idea of this, if you ever see this, is basically on is tightening on, off, taking something off. I don't know, this is a professional brand. I don't know why professionals need to remember how to take a bolt on and off, but they put it there nonetheless. So make sure you turn them off at night so they won't run out of battery. Let's put the belt on. Okay, so here's our belt. Let's just make sure everything is connected correctly. Yeah, that looks good. Let's go ahead and start this car and listen to it. That's nice and quiet. I think that's one job completed, and the owner will be very happy. Well, there you have it, folks. That was a nice 20-minute job-ish. Not really. But just so you know, in the real world, this is upwards of a 3-hour job labor-wise. Now, you look at the video, we're talking, we're having a good time, and we replace this. But when you go try it on your own, things might be a little bit more difficult, because you might be doing this job for the first time ever. You might not have the experience. Your hands might not be used to twisting upside down to get things out. But that comes with experience. The more you do, the better you get, and the more experience you have. I've done this job multiple times. However, I'll admit one thing to you. I haven't done this in a while, and it just reminds me how easy it is, the 1GR is to work on compared to, say, the 2GR and the Camry, Avalon, Highlander, Sienna, etc. They're a lot tighter, and they also have the same idler problem, but especially the older ones. The newer ones are a lot better because they already have the updated parts. Folks, always take your time with diagnosis. This is a mistake I see all the time. People just rush. What part do I need to replace? Well, before you replace parts, you need to know why, and to verify that this is exactly what the problem is. Spend most of your time in diagnosis, not in the nuts and bolts and the removal. This is just standard. Just you're taking something off, you're replacing it. Spend most of your time in diagnosis, always. I hope this video was helpful or informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos. And until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you. And you have yourself a wonderful day.